Welcome back to One Piece Explained. We have such a wild chapter to talk about this week. Oda has really put his foot on the gas for this arc, and every chapter just feels better than the last. There's so much to talk about, so I want to get into it right away. But first, I just want to say thank you again to everyone who's been supporting the channel over the past few weeks. If you're watching this and aren't subscribed, I really would appreciate it if you do. It helps the channel grow and bring these breakdowns to a larger audience. I break down the manga every week as well as the live action, and I plan on doing a breakdown of every episode as soon as possible when it premieres on August 31st. Thank you all for the support, and without further ado, let's break down chapter 1089, Hostage Situation. So, it looks like this chapter takes place the day after the events on Fuloled with the Marines and the Blackbeard Pirates, which seem to have taken place during the same time as the first day the Straw Hats arrived on Egghead. If you want a recap of where we left off with them and what unanswered questions we have on Egghead, I have a video on my channel going through all of that. I'll link it below in the description. We have the citizens of Windmill Village reacting to the newspaper about Garp and Luffy, which was hinted at in the previous chapter. Makino mentions her child is starting to recognize Luffy from his pictures in the paper. The baby's name and father have been a mystery for a while, ever since their introduction during the Fishman Island arc, about 12 years ago at this point. Oda hinted at the father in an SBS question in volume 63, but it has yet to be answered. Popular theories include Shanks, as in the digitally colored version of the manga, the baby is featured with reddish hair, although the anime uses a dark green color similar to Makino's hair. Sabo is often speculated to be the father due to the appearance of a hat looking very similar to his in the cover of chapter 806, as well as this scene after Sabo's disappearance in chapter 956, where Makino is saddened over Sabo and the baby is seemingly making out the words, Dada. I'm not super convinced either way just yet, but it will be interesting to see how this ends up going. We cut over to the Dadan family, who are also reacting to the news. There's an image on the back of the newspaper which is kind of difficult to make out. It could be Egghead Island, or perhaps the giant hole in the ocean, or maybe something else entirely. There seems to be a face going on here or something. We get this really neat montage of people in various places around the world reacting to the resulting side effects of the destruction of Leloucha. In the East Blue, we see Logtown suffering from an earthquake. Somewhere in the South Blue, a tsunami is rushing toward an island, which, if I had to make an educated guess, may be Baterilla or Baterilla, the island where Port Gasti Rouge gave birth to Ace. There are some similarities with these tropical flowers shown, as well as a similar style of architecture. But please keep in mind, these are fairly generic details of tropical islands, and this is all just conjecture. Over in the West Blue, we get a glimpse of the Kano country, with its citizens reacting to the tremors. Of note here are Chichilisha and his daughter Uklisha, who was first mentioned during the Dressrosa arc as the woman who Sai was betrothed to, and was later revealed in the volume 77 SBS. We get a similar reaction from various citizens in the North Blue. Now, my immediate thought when I saw this location was that this was Spider Miles, the port town in the North Blue that the Doflamingo family used as a hideout, as depicted during the Law flashback in the Dressrosa arc. Of course, it seems to be snowing here, while it wasn't during the flashback, which could mean that it's just the winter season in this part of the North Blue, as the idea of islands with inherent seasonal climates is specific to the islands of the Grand Line, and even then, there are seasons and exceptions. But my main reasoning for this idea is that the buildings and houses in this town look to be numbered and feature these heavy industrial components, just like Spider Miles. Once again, this is all just conjecture, but I'd love to hear what you think about my ideas of this being Spider Miles and the South Blue Island being Baterilla. Moving over to the Grand Line, we see Laboon reacting to the conditions at Twin Cape. Further along the Grand Line, we stop at Water 7 and see Iceberg reacting to the harsh winds along with Tilestone and Peeply Lulu. I'll note that the winds here are very reminiscent of those of the Aqua Laguna, the storm and accompanying high tide that happens once a year at Water 7. Now, there's a lot to unpack here, and I'll get to that in just a bit. Over in New Marineford, we have Hina, who we last saw informing Suru and Sengoku of Garp's departure to rescue Kobe. Remember that Hina was responsible for escorting Alabasta's royalty, and Alabasta's ship is still unable to leave the Red Port, with their princess missing and their king dead. We cut back to Wano, with Momonosuke looking over the flower capital, alarmed by all the tremors. And we cut to the inside of what seems to be Impel Down, with these prisoners who are also experiencing these quakes. Over on Marijoa, what do you know, the celestial dragons and even Emu are feeling the resulting side effects of the destruction of Leloucha. We're told that the destruction of Leloucha happened 6 days ago, giving us a bit more context for that timeline we're all desperately trying to maintain. Though, no one knew what exactly happened, and it seems the Marines have realized that the kingdom of Leloucha is gone, leaving only a giant round waterfall in its place. Now, a bit of conjecture, but just logically speaking, I think the Marines who found the hole may be the Marines from the G2 Marine Base, which we first saw in Ace's cover story. This is where we were first introduced to Leloucha, despite it not being named until much later, and we learned that G2 was just northeast of Leloucha, meaning it's the closest Marine base to the island. Now, the impact of whatever destroyed Leloucha was so strong that it pushed the water level across the globe by about a meter. Now, if you're like me, the first thought you had was Enies Lobby, right? And we'll get to this in just a second. We cut over to Peachy Island where we see Ivankov, Ahiru, and some newcomer reacting to the new high tide. We learn that across the world, numerous islands have become flooded due to the displaced water, and even Windmill Village all the way in the East Blue is feeling the side effects. Now, I'm not exactly sure if this is supposed to be a different time or day than the first page though, since Whoopslap looks to have a different shirt here, though this could also just be an error. Most of the places we got shown here have at least one of two things in common. They are either extremely close to the red line, or part of them is submerged underwater. Let's start with the first one. Why does being close to the red line matter? Well, we learned recently that Leloucha is relatively close to Marijoa, which sits upon the red line, and we know Leloucha is in Paradise, and is also fairly close to Peachy Island, where Kamabaka Queendom is, the current base of the revolutionaries. So, the locations that are relatively close to Leloucha and the red line would of course feel a lot of the impact of Leloucha's destruction. Lokedown is in the East Blue, and it's the last stop before a reverse mountain, placing it very close to the red line, and Twin Cape of course is right on the red line. Water 7 is connected to Enies Lobby via the sea train, and Enies Lobby is very close to the red line as well, along with Impel Down and Old Marineford, which is now Marine Base G1. New Marineford, of course, is on the other side of the red line, really close to it. And the places submerged underwater are also interesting to note because of the rising sea level. Of course, we have Water 7. Each year, the high tides of the Aqua Laguna causes Water 7 to sink just a bit. We don't really know if Water 7 is currently experiencing their Aqua Laguna, or if this is just a side effect of the destruction of Leloucha, explicitly. But, whatever the case may be, a meter of sea level rising does not bode well for Water 7. I wonder if Iceberg has figured out a way to make the island float yet. Relatively nearby, we have Impel Down, with its multiple levels of prisons being underwater, and then Wano, which we recently learned was once at sea level before the walls were erected around the island and the towns were flooded by rain, forcing people to live atop the mountain. With the sea level rising across the world, I wonder how the walls coming down and the country opening its borders would affect the rest of the world, since it would be adding a lot of fresh water into the sea. All in all, we're shown a look at various places around the world that have suffered from the rising sea level in the past, are currently suffering from it, or will in the future. I'm super interested in the various places across the world that are submerged because it hints at the possibility of the sea level gradually rising over time and in turn causing many civilizations to be lost or forced to adapt. We have some sort of evidence for this with Impel Down, as the prison may have been built at a time when the sea level was not as high as it currently is. Counterpoint, Impel Down could have just been built downward somehow. It would be difficult to imagine, but crazier things have happened in the series. However, there is evidence in the source material for civilizations that got lost in the sea. In Jinbei's cover story, somewhere between G5, a marine base in the New World by the Red Line, and Whole Cake Island, there exists a port town, and off the coast underwater of this port town are the ruins of an older civilization that housed the poneglyph. In present day, this civilization is occupied by various sea beasts who use it as their home, but its existence implies that there was once no water here. So not only did the sea level rise, but it may have not been here at all, which would also explain how Impel Down was built. Of course, this is all just conjecture at this point, but I would like to talk more about this idea in a later video. Ever since its introduction, Enies Lobby has been considered a natural mystery of the One Piece world, and for the longest time, fans have speculated that the world of One Piece is man-made, or at least shaped by man. It's not natural, right? You have this giant strip of continent that wraps around the world and an ocean that runs perpendicular to it that's surrounded by two seas without currents. That's a big hint that whatever destroyed Leloucha and formed the giant hole may have also been responsible for the hole in Enies Lobby, which likely caused the sea level to rise in years prior. And as far as we know, Enies Lobby has been around for 800 years. Now let's talk about Water 7 real quick. In an old data book, I believe it was One Piece Yellow, it was stated that Long Ring Longland's low tide displaces seawater, which ends up causing the Aqua Laguna each year. Long Ring Longland is a landmass with a giant hole in the center. Was this the result of whatever destroyed Leloucha as well? Maybe, maybe not. But Enies Lobby being so close to Water 7 likely doesn't help the situation either, and may be what initially caused the displacement of water around the surrounding area to begin with. And we know there exist submerged structures and civilizations such as the aforementioned underwater town that Jinbei came across, as well as Impel Down. So we may have some idea that it was constructed before the water level rose, but even more so, this may mean that there was no water level at all. Also, 700 years ago, the construction of Tequila Wolf began, so at least 700 years ago there was water submerging the East Blue and forming islands. The big idea here is that the water level has been rising for quite some time. This adds a bit more texture to the idea of the celestial dragons living atop the Red Line, what we know to be the highest continental landmass in the world. You may recall that they displaced the Lunarians who were once living there. Could there be something going on here where they chose to live atop the Red Line so that they could use this weapon to destroy problematic islands and people while not suffering the consequences of a rising sea level? And if this world is indeed shaped by those who are known as the creators of the world, then the tub current with all of its crazy whirlpools don't seem that crazy anymore, especially after the recent suggestion by Shiryu that there exists a government man who may have the ability to create whirlpools, who has the fourth road poneglyph. A lot of things may be coming together here. Real quick, let's talk about God Valley. God Valley was erased from the map 38 years ago, which means if the weapon was used then somehow, there should be a giant hole in the ocean somewhere. Now, you might immediately think of Enies Lobby, but Enies Lobby has been around since the end of the Void Century, apparently. Of course, that could just mean the institution itself and not necessarily a giant hole or the location, but that's yet to be seen. It'll be interesting to see how this all fits together. It's at this point when I was making this video that I realized I could go on for hours about this topic, mainly because there's a lot of speculation to be had, and we still have like half a chapter to break down. So, I'm going to stop the discussion here. I feel bad about this because I really want to get into all the possibilities and details, but I shouldn't, right? I really shouldn't make this video for an hour long. It's a chapter breakdown, right? Alright, please let me know in the comments if you'd like to hear more about this from me. I mean, I do want to talk more about this, but it probably should be in its own video. Maybe that's the video for this week, or the next week, since there's a Shonen Jump break, but I did want to make a Gear 5 Gum Gum Fruit Explained video this week as well, because the anime is catching up to that. Oh man, there's just a lot of live action stuff I want to cover too. It's so good being a One Piece fan right now. There's just so much to talk about at all times. Anyways, you let me know. I'll figure out how to get this all out at a reasonable pace, but we will talk about this at length, I promise. Over on Future Island, a convoy of marine and world government ships have surrounded Egghead. The military force here at least doubles that of a Buster Call. Real quick, here are some of the stats. A Buster Call consists of 5 Vice-Admirals with 10 battleships, each battleship having about 1,000 men, totaling to a combined force of approximately 10,000 soldiers. Over here, we have 9 Vice-Admirals, 1 Admiral, 1 of the 5 Elders, and over 100 ships, with 20 battleships among them, for a total of 30,000 soldiers. Let's take a look at these Vice-Admirals. Of course, we have Doberman, who was one of the Vice-Admirals that was part of the Buster Call that we saw on Enies Lobby. We don't know too much about him just yet, aside from him not having a pupil in one of his eyes. I've noticed Oda does this fun thing a lot with him, where his eye will get covered by a text balloon or a text box. Last we saw him was when Big Mom and Kaido made contact right before the Wano arc. Interesting to note, he's the one who gave us a Lucci lore drop back in the day, so I wonder if we'll get something here. We also have Doll, who was introduced earlier in this arc and is the commander of Marine Base G14, which is really close to Egghead. Moving on, we have these 3 Vice-Admirals that were shown back in 1078. We have this guy with glasses and messy hair, the bald dude with like 6 chins. It's kind of wild, the bottom half of his mouth is just like one big chin. And honestly, this is probably my favorite design out of the bunch. And we have this guy with the sunglasses and neck tattoos who looks to have either a blade coming out of his head, or maybe his hair is just styled like that. Either way, really cool design. Then we have a couple others. The guy with the brimmed cap and weird chin and mustache gave me pre-time skip Frankie vibes, but he looks really cool. Below him, we have this Vice-Admiral with long hair and sharp teeth. The teeth reminded me a lot of Oars and Oars Jr., but I'm thinking this is likely just a fishman. And next to them seems to be an older lady with rounded glasses. Lastly, we have this guy in the upper right corner, and I swear we've seen him before. My thought was that this was one of the giant squad members that we saw during the Marineford arc, specifically this guy next to Vice-Admiral Alone's. The beady eyes and position of the ears are pretty close, but it seems like he grew out his beard during the time skip. Of note, this was the one giant who got put down by Luffy's Gear 3rd during Marineford, so it'll be interesting to see if he has some sort of grudge against Luffy. It seems that everyone is at a bit of a stalemate. As you see across this chapter, everyone is just eating as they wait to see what happens next. Kizaru doesn't seem to be distraught at the situation, just being his usual self, and we get a reminder that the pacifista's lasers were the result of Vegapunk's research on Kizaru, which we had known from Drake's comments back during Sabaody. Kizaru comments that he's a cog in the machine, which kind of makes more sense with his unclear justice motto. St. J. Garcia Saturn is shown drinking wine and eating some sort of sausages. Very stark comparison to the noodles that the Marines were eating, and he approves of the article Morgans printed. We had seen Morgans come up with this headline back in 1074 where he claimed the world government would love it. I guess this debunks the old theory about the shadow on Egghead being J. Garcia. Now Doberman does everyone a favor and gives us a quick recap of all the major players on Egghead and describes the situation that occurred over the last day. Saturn demands the evacuated ships of researchers and laborers to be destroyed, harkening back to Sakazuki during Ohara. Interestingly, he also says that Bonnie should be left on the island and that she is no longer of use to them. We've seen the government have a weird soft spot for Bonnie, as Akainu expressed the government's concern when she had run away, and there's more to Bonnie that we don't know. I at one point thought that maybe part of the conditions for Kuma becoming a warlord and turning into the government's weapon included the government looking after Bonnie at all costs, but based on the verbiage used by Saturn here, I'm wondering if that's no longer the case or if they don't care. Also, he says that she's just a girl, which kind of makes me wonder, what is Bonnie's true age? Is she just a child? Of the worst generation, Bonnie is the only one who we don't have a true age for, as the Volume 68 SBS only said her age to be an estimate given her powers, and we've seen her act quite childish across the series with her juvenile behavior. Maybe there's something here, maybe not. It seems Kizaru still doesn't know how to use his transponder snails, as we get a Marine soldier explaining to him that he can use the black transponder snail on his wrist for wiretapping, calling back to this scene with him and Sentomaru on Sabaody. He listens in on a conversation between York and the Elders, which sounds illegal, even for an admiral, but we'll have to see how this develops. So, it seems speculation was right that the Elders decided to eliminate the Vegapunks, but after seeing the Mother Flame worked, they decided it would be useful to keep someone around who could recreate that energy source. Now, this was hinted at in 1086 before Lelouch was ordered to be destroyed as a test for the Mother Flame. York makes some demands that include her safety and the preservation of the lab that can create this energy, which was probably what she was referring to back in the flashback in 1079. So this is where my head's at on this, is the Mother Flame is just the name of the energy source that Vegapunk can recreate, and perhaps has to do with the Eternal Flame that was mentioned earlier in the arc, and whatever destroyed Lelouch wasn't the Mother Flame itself, but what the Mother Flame powered. And so if that weapon is also responsible for the hole in Enies Lobby, which seems to have existed for at least 800 years, then it seems very similar to the giant robot, just in the fact that they are both relics of the past that couldn't operate without a given energy supply. So, if the Mother Flame is that given supply and genuinely works, then perhaps the giant robot can also be fueled by it. And maybe that's how the Straw Hats are able to leave the island, because the Vega Force 1 only works within the confines of Egghead thanks to the island AC. Now, the giant weapon used by the government could be Uranus, the ancient weapon, or something else entirely, and I won't speculate on that too much explicitly. Either way, notice that York is inquiring about who desires this exactly. This may tip off anyone listening to the idea of another person running the show or being involved, since the Elders are supposed to be the highest authority as far as people know, which could be dangerous for even the likes of Kizaru, who is eavesdropping. Real quick, Oda has such good pacing and panel work with this chapter, and in general, but these past 2 pages are all fairly dense as there are back and forth between York and the Elders, so you get caught up in this momentum of the serious conversation, and then boom, flip the page, and you're hit with the big twist of the chapter. The Straw Hats already had the situation under control. A lot of people speculated and joked that this may be the case when we return to Egghead, and I'm pretty happy that we did get this. I know for some that this may feel underwhelming and undercut the tension that was ongoing before we left Egghead, but I think this works to show us how capable the Straw Hats are now at this point in their journey, as after all, they are an Emperor's crew. And also that the real tension and threat in this arc is not the murder mystery shenanigans on Egghead, but rather the large marine force outside. And I'm sure we'll get some amount of flashback to fill us in on some of the details, like how Frankie and Usopp got unpetrified, what Hotorio was doing, hopefully, where the Seraphim are, and where the satellites are, etc. If you look in the back, you'll see a huge pile of food and Sanji holding what seems to be pancakes, and even Jinbei is chowing down. It seems to me that a lot of this may have come from one of the automated cooking machines that we saw earlier in this arc. Nami looks to be holding a futuristic gun, and if I'm remembering correctly, I believe this was first shown to us a month or two ago as a promotional illustration done by Oda for Natsukomi 2023. Of course, yes, the Seraphim and satellites are missing, but we'll have to see what they're up to. Maybe they're getting fixed up or healed. I imagine the satellites are at least. But notice that Robin, Kaku, and Stussy are also not included here. Robin could be doing poneglyph research or something, and Stussy is helping her as she's familiar with the lab, but it does get me worried that she's not here with the group, while 2 CP0 agents are also missing. Even though Lucci is here and Stussy is technically on Vegapunk's side, it just makes me uncomfortable thinking that we may get another opportunity for Robin to get abducted by the government. And that's about it for the big things I wanted to talk about in this chapter. Is there anything else that you guys are curious about or want to mention? We do have a break next week, but I'll definitely have an upload for the next weekend. I've been meaning to put out a Gear 5 Gum Gum Fruit deep dive video, and with the anime catching up to that part of the series, it may be the perfect time to do so. So if you're interested in that, I'd love to know. I just want to take this final moment to say thank you for all the support over the past month or so. I've been uploading videos for 5 or 6 weeks now at this point, and it still blows my mind how far this channel has come, thanks to the help from everyone who watches and comments and subscribes. If you're watching this and still not subscribed, I really would appreciate it if you do. It goes a long way. I'd love to keep the channel growing, especially with the live action series coming up in just a few weeks, where I plan to break down every episode in depth, and that's going to be a huge task, especially since it seems like the episodes are all dropping at once, but I'm determined to get it done. I think we can do it. Once again, thank you so much for all the support. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.